Hey everybody. This is a presentation I did for the state of Nebraska and their PE teachers and how you're going to transition um, your physical training that you do in person and how you kind of transition that to doing that online or a kind of a combination of both. So a little bit of background about me and why maybe they brought me in to discuss this. So first and foremost, I'm a husband and father. I have two young kids and a great wife who is also an educator. I've been a certified strength and conditioning coach since 2005. I have owned and operated a strength and conditioning facility and company since 2006. Back then it was known as Athletic Edge Sports Performance. I've changed the name and is now called Primetime Sports Performance. Over these 15 years, I've trained somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 athletes, ranging from predominantly grade school, high school level, all the way to NFL, NBA, major leagues, and your various professional sports. In these 15 years, 7 of them have also been an educator at the higher ed area, working at a few different universities. Currently, I'm the coordinator of exercise science, sports, and fitness administration at St. Xavier University here in Chicago. And I'm also finishing up my PhD. I'm just waiting for my data collection to be complete. And that PhD is really focusing around human performance. The unique perspective our human performance concentration had is we go through a couple of education courses and how to scaffold curriculum. And I'm going to parlay that really into how we transition from our face to face to online in both the educational system and also the strength and conditioning system. So training with regards to that, we move 700 athletes a week to online with only 10% missing within 6 weeks. So out of those 700 athletes, we only had about 70 of them miss workouts on various days. So this is really a direct result for a few things, and we'll get into some of these things, but it is the respect of the program, right? Athletes buy into not only myself and my staff, but more importantly to their head coaches, the accountability factor, the their persona and their ability to attain or get to the workouts and show their coaches that they're trying to progress and get better. So it's really an accountability thing. Academically, we ran 17 courses last spring. We moved all of them online with a 98% passing rate. So again, it's great professors building great relationships. And this is a parallel. I mean, coaching and being a professor, being a presenter, all these things really are the same. It's just a different conduit in which we get our voice across or we get our message across. So for us as coaches, our message and stuff is pretty parallel to what we're trying to have our students do, right? We want them to be accountable. We want them to participate. We want them to complete work or workouts. So all these things really parallel. So I was really proud and kind of fun to see this overlapping of the athletes transitioning with 10% missing and then 17 courses moving online, which our average course will have 20 students. So that's a hefty amount of students, right? That's about 350 students or so that transition to online teaching, which is very difficult. While students are very comfortable with technology, it's not always the most available for our students, and it's not always the easiest to all of a sudden transition from where you're having this, especially in our field of exercise science, having this connection with a lab or with lab partners or that face-to-face interaction. So here are the objectives. We have 5 major objectives. We have understand how to transition from face-to-face to online training effectively. Evaluate your current program and make proper adjustments to online training. Incorporate evidence-based science into your programming, theory to practice. Simplify your workouts curriculum to make them just as engaging and challenging, also utilizing scientific principles, games and challenges, and then finally curriculum design. So let's hit number 1, transitioning to online. There are really 5 major steps from moving from a person to online. Okay, so it's patience, communication, familiarity with an online platform, Zoom, Google, whatever, Schoology, progression of a course, and then evidence-based programming. So let's dive into these. the number one thing is you have to be patient, okay? And when transitioning from either Zoom or, in person to Zoom training, or from classroom to online instruction, there's got to be patience, and there's got to be patience on both sides. The strength conditioning coach or educator has to be patient with the student athlete and or the student, because there's a transition taking place, and not everybody handles it better. There are all different types of learners, and we have to be really understanding of what kind of learner our student athletes are, or our students are, or athletes are, excuse me. And in order to grasp that, you should hit that early and often. And what we always do is we simply ask within a survey for our student athletes how they are at learning. Do they like the in-person? Do they like an extroverted coach, an introverted coach? Do they like somebody that is more in their face with coaching? For students, do you like being in person better? How do you learn in online? So when we went and transitioned to online in the classroom, I sent out a very simple survey that stated, what are your biggest concerns? Are you comfortable with learning online? And as somebody who went through an online master's program, and half my PhD was online, I'm very cognizant of the work that's involved as a student and also as a professor, of how hard that is and can be for those who are not comfortable learning that way. Conversely, it's the same thing for athletes. Some athletes just might not buy into doing bodyweight training. So it's very important to list your expectations of them, and also tell them the expectations you have of yourself as a coach. But it's always to be patient. Allow for a little room for them to get more comfortable and get some comfortability in that online platform. Communication skills, no matter in person, online, combination, communication is going to rule everything. You have to be, I would rather over communicate and over deliver than under communicate and under deliver. And you see kind of a parallel of that, right? We've had professors that I know that post nothing online no matter what. I over communicate. I send announcements. I send emails tons of times to students throughout the week. It's weekly. Hey, this is what's due. This is my expectations for the week. Please check syllabus here. X, Y, and Z is done. Same thing with my athletes. Hey, program here is done. We have 4 days a week. We're going to do 2 days a week online. You have another 2 days if you have access to a gym. If you don't, if you need another program, let me know. And it's familiarizing them with our online platform. We use Train Heroic, and communicating through that. We can text them through that Train Heroic app. Hey, why didn't you guys complete, 90%? What is the issue here? It's just a constant back and forth. And that does a couple things, right? That creates trust. It creates the ability to build a relationship. And then it builds the ability of accountability. And when you have respect and you have buy-in, you're now going to have accountability. They're going to feel obligated to do X, Y, and Z for you because you laid the foundation of good communication. It's just like building a house. You can't build a house without a good foundation. Communication is really the key cog in building that strong foundation over the course of 4 years with a student athlete, maybe through high school, or through 4 years of that student through the academic or educational realm. Get to know your platform. Practice, practice, practice. Learn the inside out of how it works, the intricacies, how it may fail, and always have a plan B. For example, if we're in a Zoom session and Zoom pops out, I should already have another link ready to go. I should have some sort of backup plan for the exercises on the strength and conditioning side, or for the objectives to be learned on the educational side, right? So we use Google form where I could send that workout ASAP to all the students and all the athletes so they have that no matter what. And it's pretty detailed. I also start off with all my workouts that are online. I give an explanation of the why we're doing it this way. Why am I supersetting a squat jump with a squat hold, or whatever it may be. But it's important to understand and learn the platform. Is learning too hard? So, we really want to look at zone of development, okay? And we're looking at how we kind of increase engagement, and so it's still fun for them. learning happens with scaffolding. And what does that mean? Scaffolding is if you think of it in the strength conditioning terms, it's sequencing things correctly in order to have a certain outcome or expected outcome. Okay, so in the educational realm, it's having these 100 level, 200, 300, and eventually when we get to these 400 level courses, we know they should have this base education or knowledge from those 100, 200, and 300 level courses. They build upon each other. Much like, I'll give an example, linear periodization, right? It builds on each other each phase. Okay, so it's very important that that's how kids learn. That's how students learn. That's how everybody learns. It's a progression over time, much like adaptation over time in the strength and conditioning realm, much like learning in the educational realm. It then goes on to independent learning. Once they have this guided help or scaffolding, they're able to learn things independently. We see athletes all the time try out new things. Hey, can I do this? Can I do that? What that tells me is two things. One, super duper comfortable in communicating to you. Two, they've learned enough, or they think they have a baseline enough of knowledge to try things on their own. That's a great thing. In the educational realm, it would be them seeking out their own information. I have a bunch of students, they have their own Instagram accounts that are doing their own training, and that makes me so happy. They're trying to put some information out there. Yes, I'm hard on them. I'll go on their Instagrams and be like, hey man, that's just not right. Or ask them questions, obviously privately, so I don't embarrass them. But they're independently learning and experimenting. That tells me that this scaffolding is working. And then learning automation, right? They've learned how they learn. Well, it sounds funny, but the learner finally understands how they learn, and they take that learning and they automatize it, right? They kind of know what they need to do in order to continue this independent learning. And what happens if we don't have this scaffolding, if we don't have this gradual build up to learning automation, it's going to get boring for them. So we have to really dive deep and find out, again, communicate and build relationships is the foundation for which the scaffolding, independent learning, and learning automation takes place. And then we have theory, right? So we use evidence-based practices. We know we have clinical expertise, we have external evidence, and then we have patient values and expectations. And somewhere in between, we have this evidence-based model. All right, and what that is doing is taking the expert or content experts, you as a coach or you as an educator, you're taking some sort of evidence, whether it is Verkhoshansky's plyometric routine, whether it's whatever latest article or research you've read, and incorporating it into your expertise. But more importantly, you're taking that external evidence and showcasing that to either the athlete or the student. You mix that with the values and expectations that you set forth prior to the course beginning or that program beginning. And those expectations are not just on the student learner or the athlete. It is as much on that educator or coach as it is on the athlete. Once the expectations are laid down, then we can go back and relay external evidence and clinical expertise. And this myriad, this joining of evidence-based model is really a key cog in moving our students from online or face-to-face strength conditioning and face-to-face education to that online presence. It's very, very important. Number two, programming for an athlete equals programming for your student. And here comes the parallel. Adhere to the 7 steps of program design. A needs analysis. A needs analysis is a great tool, something we teach early and often in our curriculum at the university, is really what does that sport or athlete need, right? It's the physiological responses. It's the adaptation of the exercises. It's the sequencing of movements. What movements are needed? All these frequency, intensity, time, that fit model is really a needs analysis. It's taking a step back and understanding the needs, much like taking a step back and understanding the needs of your students. Again, it goes back to that foundation of relationship building. Exercise selection. We select exercises based on the needs of our athletes and based on the ability of our athletes. So how will you get your athletes stronger really equates to how will you get your students to retain the knowledge that you're giving through that evidence-based model. Training frequency. So how often do you need them to train in order to see an adaptation, right? We can go by the NSCA guidelines. We can go by the ACSM guidelines. So really, how often do you need to train to have an adaptation? Equates to how often do they need to study to understand, in this case, physical education, exercise science, whatever that subject is, how often do they need to study in order to retain the knowledge that you're trying to have them get? Exercise order sequencing. How do you sequencing these exercises to lead to proper progressions and adaptations? It is really equaling that first thing we talked about, scaffolding your lessons in order to lead to a higher retention rate. Because we start at this foundation, we really try to capture our athletes, capture our students, and build on these things in a scaffolding manner. Again, that 100, 200, 300 level courses for an expectation of base knowledge. Same thing with our exercises and sequencing them, right? It's starting with these base movement patterns, your 7 fundamental foundational movement pattern, and then sequencing them in a manner where 1, it's interesting, 2, it's leading to strength and power, and 3, it's going to be able to be scaffolded over time or progressed over time where we don't lose that functional movement and ability, right? All of our exercises are based off the 7 primary movements, right? Much like your education is based off of certain evidence and certain things they need at that 100 level, which in our case is base exercise physiology, base nutritional principles, base health and wellness. And we move on to getting deeper and deeper in those basic areas. Finally, training load and repetitions. How heavy and how many reps does an athlete need to elicit adaptation? That changes from a novice, intermediate to an advanced athlete. Much like how many times does a student need to understand theory before they comprehend it, right? So, again, our students I look at as, novice, intermediate, and advanced. That novice is going to be that 1 to 2 years. The intermediate is going to be that 2 to 3 years. That advanced is going to be that 3 to 4 years when you're talking about education and expectations. But really, how long and how many times does it need to occur for them during a week and studying to really understand before they comprehend? Needs analysis. Again, we dived into this, right? So your typical strength and conditioning coaches use the program of athletes by researching needs, sport needs, and athletes. Capture the needs of your student. Goal, show your students how to design their own program, how to properly exercise using linear periodization, mixture of classroom work, theory to practical work. Explore various sports and teaching how lifting can impact those sports. So what you have to really show this and capture your needs. We use a survey. Before we train any athletes, I talked about the survey a couple slides ago, but we use a pretty giant survey. It's about 20 questions to get to know and understand our student athlete, and that way we can understand what kind of learner they are. Needs analysis action steps. So here's some action steps for you. Upon entering the semester, give that survey, capture it in a Google form so you can run analytics. And remember, we want kids to continue their exercise and activity beyond the 4 years. All these great athletes have aspirations of playing, the next 4 years at the college level. I have aspirations of my students to continue their education and always be a continual learner, right? A lifelong learner, as we say. But remember, we have to teach them the values of both. Exercise selection. So again, looking at your program in phases, 4 years, 1 years, and semesters, or your PE curriculum based on nutrition, lifelong fitness, and team individual sport. Those are just some examples, but we have to look at the macro, right? The big picture over the 4 years, break them down to micros and mesos. And that is the same principle on how we scaffold our education. So keep that in mind when we're transitioning. And we don't lose that from in-person to online. Here's a little action step. So how do we really get to attain that knowledge and retain that knowledge? We use testing batteries, right, to judge how the selection of exercises work. So what assessments are you really looking at? What assessments are you judging your own curriculum on to base if it was successful or not? Those assessments need to tie directly into your objectives and learning objectives for each of your courses. Much like your assessments and measurements and evaluations need to tie in to that athlete's overall ability and then specifically to that sport. Again, more action steps. Here's some examples. Nutrition, learning objective, discuss macronutrients and their role in health. Assessment, compare and contrast each macronutrient and how much you need daily. Communication, understand effective communication tactics to help resolve conflict. Assessment, self-reflection sheets. So this is just a little example of how you can find your assessments. Number 3, frequency of training. Again, we talked about this a little bit, but let's dive a little deeper. Again, we talked about ACSM, NSCA guidelines, 2 to 3 days a week of lifting. Plan other days to be teaching theory of coaching, sport, and exercise. Don't always rely on exercise to be the conduit in which you teach. Teach them the theory, the why behind the exercises. It pays dividends in buy-in and adherence to programs. What do you need for your students to understand your concepts as an instructor? Would 2 to 3 assignments a week work? Would more critical thinking assignments work? Case studies? Learn your students and learn how they learn, and then incorporate those learning tactics so you create buy-in, and then challenge them with other learning opportunities so they get better at their weaknesses. Action steps: make your assessments and how frequent your students study is consistent. Allow for students to give your feedback on learning style. Use different learning styles so no one is left behind. You have to have a mixture. I do a mixture of online teaching, face-to-face labs, in-person labs, out-of-person labs. It's important. Much like we give homework assignments to our athletes, making sure they're doing stuff on their own. Here's your mobility stuff. Do this every morning when you wake up. Do this before you go to bed. But also, don't be naive and don't close yourself off to action steps by your students to judge your own assessments or ask a fellow coach. It's so very, very important. Number 4, again, we're looking at that exercise order. Sequencing your exercise will lead to proper progressions, right? Complex, large muscles, single joint. Pretty typical concept of sequencing. And we're going to compare that now to concepts in theory and education. Practice those concepts and theories. Assess on the retainment of that knowledge. Again, those final assessments are so critical in education and so critical in strength and conditioning. Training load and repetitions, how heavy and how often. This is the NSCA guideline to training goal, load intensity, repetition range, and rest period, right? How many times does a student need to understand theory before they comprehend it? So kind of the same parameter. What's the intensity level of your coursework compared to what's your intensity level in the weight room? And they have to equal and they have to be progressive over time so we don't overload them too early, too often, and create burnout. Right? Overtraining in the gym is much like overtraining in the classroom. You can burn them out. You can overload their brains too quickly, too fast, and you're going to lose buy-in, lose retention because they just can't handle that stressor. Same with an athlete. Their bodies can't handle immediate overload if they've been out 2 to 3, 4 weeks over a summer and they're coming back. And it has to be progressive. It has to make sense. And it has to adhere by some guidelines in which we can assess, much like the classroom. So when you're transitioning from that face-to-face to online, we don't lose the intensity level. We have to figure out ways to incorporate their current intensity level. And you could do that with bodyweight stuff. You just have to know how to program it and understand what these parameters mean. So here's here's how you can kind of relay that into students and athletes. So typically a student needs to read, practice, and apply before the retention of knowledge is maintained. Scaffolding ideas to theory, to practice, application of orders, or teaching others. It works well for retainment. Sometimes we'll challenge our athletes to run that workout. We'll give them the workout, they can run it. All right, gives them a sense of accountability, some leadership. Much like when we ask students to present on a topic so they teach the class. And you could do that online. You can do that face-to-face. It's a great tool to allow some students to build confidence, to build confidence among their peers, and to really help them become leaders. Incorporate evidence-based science into programming. So how do we run theory to practice? What is your current process? Is it a textbook, current articles, or is it nothing at all? Currently, most universities and high schools use textbooks for their source of information. While good, most are out of date and publishing process. Typically when a book comes out, 6 months to a year past when the last really good research is out. So articles are your best friend, excuse me, and sources for theory. You do not have to be a pure researcher, but teaches critical thinking skills. Give them something to read. Give your athletes something to read about the current thing you're doing for that program. Super duper important, super duper relatable to that evidence-based model, and again allows them for that independent learning and that retention of knowledge. Again, EBP is the best way to get proper theory, critical thinking questions, ability to carry discussions on the why, and facilitate and assess your students' knowledge. I'll often get questions from my students of, man, this wasn't in the book, or this wasn't in the PowerPoints. Correct. I need you to go out and search. I need you to be an investigator. Much like an athlete of, hey man, why are we doing 92% of our 1 rep max? Well, why don't you go, here's an article, here's my reason why, but here's some other evidence to show you I'm not the only one. Okay? Gives a little credence to the why behind your program or the why behind your teaching. Keeping the engagement. So team approach is taken. Students are very involved at every stage. So you have to listen to your student's voice. I currently have 143 advisees, okay? I listen to each one. We each have an hour meeting at least twice a year. Analyze the student voice. I write down, take notes. What are they really saying, and how can I interpret that? Agree upon the action taken. So usually if we're selecting courses, I need you by tonight at 10 o'clock to register for these classes. I need you by 9 o'clock to finish this project. I need you as the athlete by 9 o'clock to get me your food log. Have them take action and show them that you are taking action as well. And then you want to close that feedback loop, right? You want to go back and discuss these 3 before mentioned things to close that feedback. Much like learning and motor behavior, right? There's that loop, right? You got to practice, you got to perfect, you got to always maintain that movement pattern so it doesn't get lost. Often instructors do not listen, right? Taking a survey really helps that. It shows them that you're listening, it shows them you care. At the beginning of each virtual lesson, ask how they're doing. Come up with a game, improv, engage so you allow them to listen. I always ask these guys, hey guys, when we were doing, we had, 700 athletes online training a week. I ran a lot of the baseball stuff, which was 100 athletes at a time on Zoom. And it's really, hey guys, how you doing today? Hey, we might not be able to get into school and get in the weight room, but this is what we got today. I'm pretty excited about this. Somebody give me something good that's happened to them today, right? You're asking 96 to 100 students to wake up at 8 a.m. and get their lifting on. We had 100% retention rate on that baseball squad. And again, that's compliments to the coach, compliments to the student athletes for buy-in, and then compliments to, how we engaged them and made sure it was interesting. We then created, we did like a challenge of the week where all 700 athletes were partaking in that challenge, which whatever it could be. It could be squat jumps in a minute, how many squat jumps you got, how many squats you got, and we created a little leaderboard. So it had a little bit of theme. We might have done some Sally up, Sally downs, where we play a song and it'll Sally down, Sally up for push-ups. Fun stuff. Analyze the student's voice, and then for virtuals, spotlight students during the workout. Talk to them, engage with them, select 3 to 5 students to spotlight each day. That's kind of how I ran it. Agree on action of the workout, right? So I always overview the workout at the beginning, ask for the agreement. You guys ready to go? You guys got this? You guys understand it? And set that expectation and verbal agree to that action. Take action. If you see something wrong, coach them. You should never, I tell you, man, when I was doing this online coaching, I've cued more and came up with more interesting cues than ever before because I couldn't, physically be there with them. So it was coming up with great external cues and it really, really refined my cueing and engagement. And then compliment the good movements. Oftentimes as strength coaches, even as educators, we don't compliment the good. We always sit there and analyze and try to fix the bad. Make sure you compliment good movements. As an educator, make sure you compliment good work. Close the feedback loop. Good coach MP will close feedback loop by finishing your sessions with a Q&A section and allow for students to voice anything they need and allow to gain, and assess actions and movements for the student's engagement. Games and fun, incorporate improv, have fitness challenges again, and you can recognize the hardest worker with a set of guidelines. Curriculum design, 4 big steps, switching to online. Maintain current assessments related to the topic. Remove all your exams. Yes, you cannot rely on your ability to just listen and attain knowledge. Remove the exams. 1, they can cheat. 2, it's not really doing anything. Turn to more critical thinking questions and mini papers, right? Assess their knowledge of writing, another skill that we're lacking at the higher education level. With regard to training, you want to make sure that we're watching them and looking at them. While there's no assessments and evaluations per se when you're lifting at a max rep or max intensity, your assessments are going to be finishers at the end of your workout, spotlighting students and making sure that they're engaged and that they're actually performing the workouts. Have a final that fits with what you've previously done face-to-face so they don't lose that ability. Your learning objectives are key to your student success. Create new learning objectives for 3 weeks remaining in your course for transitioning to the middle of the year. Create a new module area of online platforms. So we use Canvas at the university. I create a new module specifically so they can go to it and it says online teaching. For our athletes, during our, we use Train Heroic. We had online only programs or bodyweight programs. So we created a new thing, invited all 700 athletes to partake. Create a new syllabus if you're an educator. And with the remaining weeks left, when you're a strength conditioning coach, create a remainder of your online training plan. No more exams. I said it. Kids loved it. Critical thinking. This is why I said choose critical thinking over assessments of exams. It creates reasoning, problem solving, and it's a much easier way, a more effective way to evaluate your students' retention of knowledge. Have a final that fits with what you've previously done. Start off with a transition of a video stating what you have already learned and use the first weeks as an overall refresher. In the video, state your remaining goals and expectations. You have to set expectations for them. State your own expectations of your overall self. Again, remember, you have to be open to listening to their criticisms as well. In the education, it's pretty easy. We have student evaluation, SEIs we call them, and they fill out this Likert scale then at the end of the semester. We also do that for student athletes, to create a Likert scale for them to judge us as well. State your new learning objectives, and finally tell them that you understand that everyone learns effectively this way. Put that up there out front. Some may argue it's creating an excuse for them. I say I trust my students enough and have a good enough relationship, that foundation of communication, where they're not going to use it as an excuse. Well, some of them, of course. That goes on with any large group of people. You always have some people that are going to use excuses, but at least we put that out there up front. And remember to have fun, whether it's education or strength conditioning. The goal here is to have fun. Oftentimes we get lost in the cool thing about program design, the cool thing about pushing our athletes, the cool thing about educating our students. Always have fun. Always have a little bit of joking, a little bit of fun. Reel it back in. Have a little fun, reel it back in. It's really, really important. And thank you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you pulled away a couple nuggets of how curriculum design in the education realm and program design in the athletic realm merge, kind of run parallel together and have a really close relationship, specifically when transitioning from face-to-face to online. You can email me at any time. This is my university email. This is my cell phone. And then you can look at my company's profile on primetimesp.com. We also are launching Strength Mentor, where we're going to go over curriculum design. We're going to go over resume building and all sorts of things with regard to strength conditioning coaches. They may start to teach. That's very popular as you obtain your master's degree. You might pull some adjunct work. The biggest gap we see is transitioning your coaching style to your teaching style. And it is a little bit different. And the programming and scaffolding of education have run very parallel, as you've seen here. You just got to know how to do it, know how to change verbs and adjectives that align with your teaching philosophy, much like your coaching philosophy. So it's really building a whole new area for you of expertise, and that's what the Strength Mentor is designed. Again, I thank you guys so much. I hope you have a great day. Any questions, comment below. Thank you.